Marcus Thompson drove slowly through the quiet streets of his hometown, a small smile on his face as he thought about surprising his little sister Sarah. He had been away for 8 months on a mission that he could never talk about, not even to his family. All they knew was that he worked for the military and sometimes had to go away for long periods. What they didn't know was that Marcus was one of the most skilled soldiers in the entire United States Army. At 34 years old, Marcus had spent the last 12 years of his life serving his country as a member of Delta Force, the most elite special operations unit in the military. He had been to places that most people only saw in movies, done things that would never appear in any newspaper, and saved lives in ways that would remain classified forever. But right now, all he wanted to be was a big brother coming home to celebrate his sister's 28th birthday. The rental car's GPS guided him toward the flower shop downtown. Sarah had always loved sunflowers, and Marcus remembered how she used to draw them all over her school notebooks when they were kids. Their parents had died in a car accident when Sarah was only 16, and Marcus had been her guardian ever since. Even when his military duties took him around the world, he never missed her birthday. As he stopped at a red light, Marcus checked his watch. It was 2:30 in the afternoon, and Sarah's birthday party was supposed to start at 6 p.m. He had plenty of time to buy the flowers, grab a quick shower at his hotel, and then show up at her apartment to shock her with his surprise visit. He had told her he couldn't make it this year because of work, so she had no idea he was even in the country. The light turned green, and Marcus pressed the gas pedal gently. The blue sedan moved forward smoothly as he continued down Main Street. He noticed how much the town had changed since he was a kid. New buildings had gone up, old ones had been torn down, and there were faces he didn't recognize walking on the sidewalks. But the basic feel of the place was still the same, still the small town where he and Sarah had grown up. Behind him, 3 police cars suddenly appeared with their lights flashing. Marcus looked in his rearview mirror, confused. The sirens were loud, but he figured they were responding to some emergency and would pass him by. He pulled over to the right side of the road to let them through, just like any good citizen would do. But the police cars didn't pass him. Instead, they surrounded his vehicle. Marcus felt his heart start to beat faster as officers jumped out of their cars with their hands on their weapons. This made no sense. He hadn't been speeding, hadn't run any red lights, hadn't done anything wrong at all. "Get out of the car, get out now," one of the officers shouted. Marcus could see that the man was young, maybe in his 20s, and he looked nervous. Marcus raised his hands slowly so the officers could see them, then carefully opened his door. "There must be some mistake, officer," Marcus said in a calm voice. "I haven't done anything wrong. Shut up and get on the ground." Another officer yelled. This one was older, with gray hair and a thick mustache. "Face down, hands behind your head." Marcus felt a cold anger starting to build in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had been trained to control his emotions in much more dangerous situations than this. Slowly, he got down on his knees, then lay face down on the asphalt. The concrete was rough against his cheek, and he could feel small pieces of gravel digging into his skin. The handcuffs clicked around his wrists with a sharp metallic sound. They were too tight, cutting into his skin, but Marcus didn't complain. One of the officers was searching through his rental car while the others stood around him with their weapons still drawn. "What's this?" the searching officer called out. He was holding Marcus's military duffel bag, the one that contained his tactical gear and extra uniforms. "Looks like we got ourselves a real tough guy here." Marcus tried to explain. "I'm active duty military. My identification is in my wallet. If you just check my ID, you'll see that I'm Sergeant First Class Marcus Thompson, United States Army." The older officer with the mustache looked down at him with suspicious eyes. "Sure you are, buddy. And I'm the President of the United States. We got a call about a black man in a blue sedan acting suspicious in this area. Looks like we found our guy." "What was I doing that was suspicious?" Marcus asked. "I was just driving to buy flowers for my sister's birthday." The officers ignored his question. They pulled him to his feet and started walking him toward one of the police cars. Marcus noticed that a small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk to watch what was happening. Some people were taking pictures with their phones while others just stared. He felt embarrassed and angry, but mostly he felt confused. This couldn't be happening. As they put him in the back of the police car, Marcus heard one of the officers talking on his radio. "Yeah, we got him. Black male, about 6 feet tall, driving the blue sedan just like the caller described. We're bringing him in now." The car ride to the jail took about 15 minutes. Marcus sat quietly in the back seat, his hands still cuffed. Behind him, thinking about what had just happened, someone had called the police and said that a black man in a blue car was acting suspicious. That was it. No crime had been committed, no law had been broken. Just a black man driving through a neighborhood where someone thought he didn't belong. Marcus had faced enemy soldiers in combat, had been shot at by terrorists, had jumped out of airplanes in the middle of the night into hostile territory. But somehow this felt more frightening than any of those experiences. At least in combat he knew who the enemy was and why they were fighting. Here, he was being treated like a criminal by the very people he had spent his life protecting. The Riverside County Jail was a large gray building surrounded by high walls and razor wire. As the police car pulled into the parking lot, Marcus could see inmates in orange uniforms working in a small garden area near the entrance. They looked up as the car passed, and Marcus wondered what they were thinking as they watched another black man being brought in. The booking process was slow and humiliating. They took his fingerprints, photographed him from different angles, and asked him dozens of questions. When he tried to explain that he was in the military and that this was all a mistake, the desk sergeant just looked at him with tired eyes and kept filling out forms. "You'll get your phone call later," the sergeant said. "Right now you're being charged with suspected vehicle theft and resisting arrest." "I wasn't resisting arrest," Marcus said. "I did exactly what the officers told me to do." The sergeant shrugged. "That's what they all say. Welcome to Riverside County Jail, Mr. Thompson. Hope you enjoy your stay." Marcus woke up on a thin mattress that felt like it was made of cardboard. The holding cell was small and dirty, with gray concrete walls covered in scratches and graffiti. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, casting harsh shadows everywhere. The smell of disinfectant mixed with sweat and fear filled the air. He had spent his first night in this place, listening to the sounds of other prisoners crying, arguing, and banging on their cell doors. His body ached from sleeping on the hard surface, but Marcus had slept in much worse places during his military service. What bothered him more was the fact that he was still here at all. By now, someone should have checked his identification. Someone should have made a phone call to verify his military status. Someone should have realized that this was all a terrible mistake. At 6 in the morning, a guard banged on his cell door with a metal stick. "Wake up, Thompson. Time to move you to general population." The guard was a young man with pale skin and nervous eyes. He looked like he was new to the job and didn't really want to be there. Marcus sat up slowly and rubbed his neck. "Has anyone checked my military ID yet? I've been trying to tell everyone that I'm active duty Army." The guard shrugged. "That's not my department, man. I just move people where they tell me to move them. Come on, let's go." They walked through several long hallways with concrete floors and fluorescent lights overhead. Other prisoners were being moved around too, all wearing the same orange uniforms. Some of them looked scared, especially the younger ones. Others looked angry or just tired, like they had given up hope a long time ago. Marcus noticed everything as they walked. The locations of cameras, the positions of guards, the layout of the building. It was automatic for him, something his military training had burned into his brain. Always know your surroundings. Always have an escape plan. Always be ready for anything. They stopped in front of a heavy metal door marked Block D. The guard used a large key to unlock it, and they stepped into a different world. This part of the prison was louder and more chaotic than where Marcus had spent the night. Prisoners were talking, laughing, arguing, and playing cards at small, metal tables. The smell here was worse too, a mixture of unwashed bodies, cheap food, and something else that Marcus couldn't identify. "Thompson!" a loud voice called out from across the room. Marcus looked up to see a large man in a guard uniform walking toward them. This guard was different from the others Marcus had seen. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with gray hair, and cold blue eyes. His uniform was perfectly pressed and he walked like a soldier, but there was something mean about his face that made Marcus feel cautious. "I'm Captain Rick Morrison," the guard said, stopping right in front of Marcus. "I run this block, and I want to make sure we understand each other from the very beginning." Marcus nodded respectfully. "Yes, sir. I understand." Morrison's eyes narrowed. "Sir, you think you're in the army now, boy. This ain't no military base. This is my prison, and you're just another criminal in an orange suit." "I am in the army." "Captain Morrison," Marcus said calmly. "I'm Sergeant First Class Marcus Thompson, and I'm here by mistake. If someone would just check my identification—" "Shut up," Morrison interrupted. "I don't want to hear your lies. You think that military act is going to get you special treatment? Well, let me tell you something, Thompson. I've seen plenty of guys like you come through here. They all think they're tough. They all think they're special. But in the end, they all learn to follow my rules." Morrison pointed to a cell at the far end of the block. "That's your new home. Your cellmate is Jimmy Rodriguez. He's been here for 8 years, so he can teach you how things work around here. And Thompson?" Morrison leaned closer and Marcus could smell coffee and cigarettes on his breath. "I'll be watching you very carefully." Marcus walked to his assigned cell, feeling the eyes of other prisoners and guards following him. The cell was tiny, just big enough for 2 narrow bunk beds and a small toilet. An older Hispanic man was sitting on the lower bunk, reading a paperback book. He looked up when Marcus entered. "You must be my new roommate," the man said with a tired smile. "I'm Jimmy Rodriguez. Welcome to paradise." Jimmy was in his 50s with gray hair and kind eyes. He had been a construction worker before his arrest on drug charges, and he still had the strong hands of someone who had worked hard his whole life. As Marcus unpacked his few belongings, Jimmy explained the unwritten rules of Block D. "First thing you need to know," Jimmy said quietly, "is that Captain Morrison is bad news. He's been here for 20 years and he thinks he owns this place. He's got a special hatred for black guys and military guys. Since you're both, you're going to be his favorite target." Marcus sat down on the upper bunk. "What do you mean by favorite target?" Jimmy looked around to make sure no one was listening, then lowered his voice even more. "Morrison likes to pick fights. He'll push you until you react, and then he'll say you were being violent. I've seen him beat guys half to death and then write in his report that they attacked him first." "Has anyone ever reported him?" Marcus asked. Jimmy laughed bitterly. "To who? His boss, the warden? They're all friends. They've been working together for years. The only way to survive Morrison is to keep your head down, don't make eye contact, and do exactly what he says no matter how stupid or unfair it is." That afternoon, Marcus got his first real taste of prison life. The cafeteria was a large room filled with long metal tables and benches. The food was terrible, some kind of gray meat, overcooked vegetables, and bread that tasted like cardboard. But Marcus had eaten worse things during his military service, so he didn't complain. What bothered him more was watching how the guards treated the prisoners. They spoke to grown men like they were children, used unnecessary force for minor problems, and seemed to enjoy making people feel small and powerless. Marcus saw one guard slam a prisoner against the wall just for asking a question about his medication. "You see how it is," Jimmy whispered as they sat at a corner table. "They want us to feel like animals. They want us to forget that we're human beings." Marcus watched Captain Morrison walk through the cafeteria like a king inspecting his kingdom. The other guards followed him, and all the prisoners looked down at their food when he passed their tables. Morrison's eyes found Marcus across the room, and for a long moment, the 2 men stared at each other. "He's already marked you?" Jimmy said sadly. "I can see it in his face. You better be very careful, Marcus, very careful." That night, as Marcus lay on his narrow bunk staring at the ceiling, he thought about his sister Sarah. Today was her birthday, and she was probably wondering why he hadn't called. She had no idea where he was, or what had happened to him. For the first time since his arrest, Marcus felt truly alone, but he also felt something else growing inside him. A quiet, controlled anger that he recognized from his years as a soldier. He had been trained to survive in hostile environments, to stay calm under pressure, and to never give up, no matter how bad things got. Captain Morrison thought he was dealing with just another street criminal, but he was about to learn that Marcus Thompson was something very different. The war was about to begin. Marcus had been in Riverside County Jail for 3 days now, and he was starting to understand how the system worked. The guards had all the power, and the prisoners had none. Captain Morrison walked around like he owned every brick in the building, and everyone was afraid of him. But Marcus wasn't like everyone else, even though he was trying his best to blend in. Every morning started the same way. At 6 o'clock, the lights would come on, and a guard would bang on the cell doors with his stick. "Wake up, time for breakfast." The prisoners would line up in the hallway, shuffle to the cafeteria, eat their terrible food, and then go to their assigned activities. Some worked in the kitchen, others cleaned the floors, and a few got to spend time in the small exercise yard outside. Marcus had been assigned to work in the prison library. It was a quiet job that suited him perfectly. He could read books, organize shelves, and stay out of trouble. The librarian was an older woman named Mrs. Patterson who had worked at the prison for 15 years. She was one of the few staff members who treated the prisoners like human beings. "You're different from most of the men who come through here," she told Marcus on his second day. "You have good manners, and you actually read the books instead of just looking at the pictures." Marcus smiled. "My sister taught me to love reading when we were kids. She's probably wondering where I am right now." Mrs. Patterson looked at him with curious eyes. "What are you in here for, if you don't mind me asking?" "They think I stole a car," Marcus said. "But it's all a mistake. I was just visiting my hometown when the police arrested me." The old woman shook her head sadly. "I've heard that story many times before. But something about the way you carry yourself makes me think you might be telling the truth." During his free time, Marcus worked out in the exercise yard. He did push-ups, sit-ups, and pull-ups on the rusty metal bars. His military training had taught him to keep his body in perfect condition, no matter where he was. Other prisoners watched him exercise and whispered among themselves. They could tell he was strong, but they had no idea just how dangerous he really was. Jimmy Rodriguez had become his closest friend in the prison. The older man had taken Marcus under his wing and taught him which guards to avoid, which prisoners to stay away from, and how to get through each day without causing problems. "You're doing good so far," Jimmy told him as they sat in their cell one evening. "Morrison hasn't bothered you much, and that's a good sign. Maybe he's decided to leave you alone." But Jimmy was wrong. Captain Morrison had been watching Marcus very carefully, and he didn't like what he saw. The new prisoner was too calm, too confident, too respectful. Morrison was used to breaking men down until they were scared and broken. But Marcus Thompson showed no signs of fear, and that made Morrison angry. On Thursday evening, the breaking point finally came. Marcus was sitting alone in the cafeteria, eating his dinner of cold soup and stale bread. He had learned to eat quickly and quietly, finishing his meal before most of the other prisoners even sat down. The cafeteria was noisy as usual, filled with the sounds of talking, laughing, and metal trays clanking against tables. Suddenly, a fight broke out near the serving line. Two prisoners started pushing each other over something stupid. One man had accidentally bumped into the other while getting his food. Within seconds, they were throwing punches and rolling around on the floor. Other prisoners started cheering and forming a circle around the fight. The guards rushed in to break it up, blowing their whistles and shouting orders. In all the confusion, someone knocked over Marcus's tray, sending soup and bread flying across the table. Marcus stood up calmly and started cleaning up the mess with napkins from the dispenser. That's when Captain Morrison appeared behind him like a shadow. "Well, well, well," Morrison said in a loud voice that cut through all the noise in the cafeteria. "Look what we have here. Our quiet little soldier boy is causing trouble now." Marcus turned around slowly, his hands empty and visible. The fighting had stopped, and every eye in the cafeteria was now focused on him and Morrison. "There's no trouble here, Captain," Marcus said respectfully. "Someone knocked over my tray during the fight. I'm just cleaning it up." Morrison stepped closer, so close that Marcus could smell the man's aftershave and see the small scar on his chin. "Don't you dare lie to me, Thompson. I saw you start that fight. I saw you signal those two men to create a distraction. Marcus felt his heart start beating faster, but he kept his voice calm and steady. That's not true, sir. I was sitting here eating my dinner when the fight started. I had nothing to do with it. Are you calling me a liar? Morrison's voice got louder and angrier. Are you saying that I don't know what I saw with my own eyes? The entire cafeteria had gone completely silent now. Even the other guards had stopped what they were doing to watch the confrontation. Marcus could feel the tension in the air like electricity before a thunderstorm. He knew that whatever happened in the next few minutes would change everything. I'm not calling you anything, Captain Morrison, Marcus said carefully. I'm just telling you what really happened. I didn't start any fight, and I didn't signal anyone to do anything. Morrison's face turned red with anger. You think that military attitude makes you special, don't you? You think you're better than everyone else in here? Well, let me tell you something, Thompson. Your fancy training don't mean nothing when you're just another number in an orange suit. Marcus could feel his military training kicking in automatically. His body was getting ready for combat even though his mind was still trying to avoid it. His muscles tensed, his breathing became controlled, and his eyes began calculating distances and angles. Morrison was standing too close, making himself vulnerable to a dozen different attacks that Marcus could execute in less than 2 seconds. But Marcus also knew that if he fought back, it would only make things worse for him. Morrison wanted him to lose control. The captain was trying to provoke him into doing something stupid that would justify whatever punishment was coming next. I don't think I'm better than anyone, Marcus said quietly. I just want to serve my time and go home to my family. Morrison smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator who had cornered his prey. Oh, you'll serve your time, all right. But first, you need to learn some respect. The captain grabbed Marcus by the arm, his fingers digging into the muscle like claws. You're coming with me, Thompson. It's time someone taught you how things really work in my prison. Marcus felt Morrison's grip tighten, and every instinct in his body screamed at him to break the man's wrist and end this confrontation right now. But he also heard Jimmy's voice in his head, warning him about what happened to prisoners who fought back against the guards. I understand, Captain, Marcus said through gritted teeth. You don't need to use force, I'll come with you. But Morrison had already made up his mind. This was his moment to show everyone in the prison who was really in charge. He squeezed Marcus's arm even harder and started dragging him toward the exit. That's when Marcus made his decision. He had spent 12 years learning how to fight for his country. Now it was time to fight for himself. The first blow came faster than anyone expected. Captain Morrison raised his baton high above his head, aiming for Marcus's skull with enough force to knock him unconscious. But Marcus wasn't there anymore. In one smooth movement, he had stepped sideways and ducked under the swing, his body moving with the deadly grace of a trained killer. Morrison's baton hit empty air, and the captain stumbled forward from his own momentum. Before he could recover his balance, Marcus was behind him, one hand on Morrison's wrist and the other on his elbow. With a slight twist and push, Marcus sent the captain crashing into the nearest table, food trays flying everywhere. The entire cafeteria erupted in chaos. Prisoners jumped up from their seats, some cheering, others trying to get out of the way. Guards came running from every direction, their boots pounding on the concrete floor like thunder. But all eyes were focused on the impossible scene in the center of the room. One man in an orange uniform was fighting off multiple trained guards, and he was winning. Guard Jackson came at Marcus from the left, swinging his baton in a wide arc. Marcus caught the weapon in mid-swing, twisted it out of Jackson's hands, and used the man's own forward motion to flip him over his shoulder. Jackson hit the ground hard, his breath knocked out of him, the baton clattering across the floor. Stop. Resisting, shouted Guard Williams as he charged from the right. But Marcus wasn't resisting. He was fighting back with skills that none of these men had ever seen before. Williams swung his baton down toward Marcus's head, but Marcus blocked the strike with his forearm, grabbed Williams by the shirt, and threw him into two other guards who were rushing in behind him. Captain Morrison had gotten back to his feet, his face red with rage and embarrassment. Take him down. Use your tasers. Use whatever you have to. but his men were having trouble even getting close to Marcus, let alone subduing him. Marcus moved like water, flowing around their attacks and striking back with precision that was almost surgical. He didn't try to seriously hurt anyone. His goal was just to defend himself and create space. But every move he made showed years of training that went far beyond anything a street criminal could possibly know. Guard Peterson tried to tackle Marcus from behind, but Marcus sensed him coming and sidestepped at the last second. Peterson crashed into the wall face first, breaking his nose and falling to the ground in a pool of blood. The sight of blood seemed to make the other guards even more desperate and angry. "He's some kind of martial arts expert," shouted Guard Davis as he circled Marcus carefully, looking for an opening. "This ain't no regular prisoner." Marcus stood in the center of the chaos, his breathing controlled and steady despite the violence surrounding him. His orange uniform was torn, and there was a cut on his forehead from someone's baton, but he looked calm and ready for whatever came next. This was what he had been trained for: to stay cool under pressure, to think clearly in the middle of combat, to survive when everyone wanted him dead. More guards poured into the cafeteria, and Marcus found himself surrounded by 8 men, all carrying batons, all looking for revenge. They formed a circle around him, trying to coordinate their attack. Marcus turned slowly, keeping all of them in his sight, his mind automatically calculating angles and distances. "I am Sergeant First Class Marcus Thompson, United States Army," he said in a voice that carried across the entire cafeteria. "I am not resisting arrest, but I will defend myself if you continue this unlawful assault." His words were spoken with such authority and confidence that several of the younger guards actually hesitated. This didn't sound like any prisoner they had ever dealt with. This sounded like a man who was used to giving orders, not taking them. But Morrison was beyond listening to reason. "I don't care if you're the president himself," he screamed. "You just assaulted multiple officers and you're going to pay for it." The captain pulled out his taser and aimed it at Marcus's chest. "This ends now, Thompson." But before Morrison could pull the trigger, the cafeteria doors burst open, and Warden Patricia Walsh strode into the room. She was a tall woman in her 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had been running prisons for 30 years, and she could read a situation instantly. "What in the hell is going on here?" she demanded, her voice cutting through all the shouting and chaos. The fighting stopped immediately. Guards froze in place, prisoners sat back down at their tables, and even Morrison lowered his taser. Everyone in the prison respected Warden Walsh, and no one wanted to be on her bad side. "Captain Morrison," she said, walking slowly toward the center of the cafeteria, "would you care to explain why one prisoner is standing in the middle of 8 guards, and why half of your men are on the ground?" Morrison's face was still red with anger, but he tried to control his voice. "This prisoner attacked us, Warden. He started a riot and assaulted multiple officers. We were just trying to subdue him." Warden Walsh looked around the cafeteria, taking in every detail. She saw the overturned tables, the scattered food, the guards with bruises and cuts, and Marcus Thompson standing calmly in the middle of it all. Something about the scene didn't add up. "Is that what happened, Mr. Thompson?" she asked, looking directly at Marcus. Marcus met her eyes without flinching. "No, ma'am, it's not. Captain Morrison grabbed me and tried to hit me with his baton without provocation. I defended myself, nothing more." "He's lying," Morrison shouted. "He's a violent criminal who thinks his military background makes him special." The warden raised her hand for silence. She had noticed something that Morrison apparently hadn't: the way Marcus stood, the way he spoke, the way he carried himself even after a fight. This man had real military bearing, not the fake kind that some prisoners tried to put on. "Mr. Thompson," she said carefully, "what exactly is your military background?" Marcus straightened to attention automatically. "I am Sergeant First Class Marcus Thompson, United States Army Special Operations. I have served for 12 years in various classified capacities." The cafeteria went completely silent. Even the prisoners stopped whispering among themselves. Special operations was something everyone had heard of, even if they didn't understand exactly what it meant. Warden Walsh felt a cold chill run down her spine. If this man was telling the truth, if he really was Special Forces, Then this situation was about to become much bigger than a simple prison fight. "Captain Morrison," she said quietly, "I think we need to verify Mr. Thompson's identity immediately. And until we do, nobody, and I mean nobody, is to lay another hand on this prisoner." Morrison's face went pale as he realized what the warden was suggesting. If Marcus Thompson really was a decorated soldier, if this whole thing had been a mistake, then Morrison's career was over. The truth was about to come out. Within 2 hours of the cafeteria fight, Warden Walsh was sitting in her office staring at a computer screen in complete shock. The military database had confirmed everything that Marcus Thompson had told them. He wasn't just a regular soldier. He was one of America's most elite warriors. The records showed 12 years of distinguished service, including multiple deployments to Afghanistan, Iraq, and several other countries that were marked as classified. He had received the Bronze Star for Valor, the Purple Heart for wounds received in combat, and numerous other medals and commendations. His commanding officers described him as one of the best soldiers they had ever worked with. Brave, intelligent, and completely dedicated to his mission. "This is impossible," she whispered to herself, as she scrolled through page after page of Marcus's service record. "How did we end up with a Delta Force operative in our general population?" Her assistant knocked on the door and entered without waiting for permission. "Ma'am, I have the sheriff's department on the phone. They want to know about the incident with prisoner Thompson." Warden Walsh picked up the phone with hands that were shaking slightly. "This is Warden Walsh. I need to speak to Sheriff Roberts immediately, and I mean right now." Sheriff Roberts came on the line within minutes. "Patricia, what's this I'm hearing? About a riot at your facility?" "Robert, we have a serious problem," the warden said. "The man your officers arrested 3 days ago isn't a car thief. He's Sergeant First Class Marcus Thompson, United States Army Special Forces. He's been serving his country for 12 years, and he's currently on leave." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "That's not possible," the sheriff finally said. "My officers arrested him for vehicle theft. The car he was driving matched the description of a stolen vehicle." "What stolen vehicle?" Warden Walsh asked. "I've been looking through the paperwork, and I can't find any report of a stolen car that matches the one he was driving." Another silence. "I'll have to call you back," Sheriff Roberts said quietly, and the line went dead. Meanwhile, in the prison medical unit, Marcus was getting his cuts and bruises treated by the nurse. The fight had left him with a split lip, a cut on his forehead, and several bruises on his arms and chest. But he had given much worse than he had received, and everyone in the prison knew it. Jimmy Rodriguez sat in the chair next to the medical bed, shaking his head in amazement. 12 years I've been in this place," he said. "I've seen tough guys, crazy guys, and mean guys. But I ain't never seen nothing like what you did in that cafeteria." Marcus winced as the nurse cleaned the cut on his forehead. "I didn't want to fight them, Jimmy. I tried to avoid it for as long as I could." "Man, you took on 8 guards at once and made it look easy," Jimmy said with a grin. "Morrison's face when you flipped him over that table. I'm going to remember that for the rest of my life." The nurse finished bandaging Marcus's wounds and left them alone. Through the small window they could see Captain Morrison in the hallway, talking angrily with 2 other guards. His uniform was torn, his face was bruised, and his pride was completely destroyed. "He's going to try to get revenge," Jimmy warned. "Morrison don't forget, and he don't forgive. You embarrassed him in front of the whole prison, and that's something. He ain't never going to let go." But Marcus wasn't worried about Morrison anymore. He could see the fear in the captain's eyes when they had brought him to the medical unit. Morrison had finally realized that he wasn't dealing with a regular prisoner, and now he was scared about what was going to happen next. An hour later, Warden Walsh came to the medical unit personally. She looked tired and stressed, like someone who had just received very bad news. "Mr. Thompson," she said formally, "I need to speak with you privately." They went to a small conference room where the warden sat down across from Marcus at a metal table. "I've verified your military service," she said without any introduction. "I've spoken with your commanding officer. I've reviewed your service record and I've confirmed that you are currently on authorized leave." Marcus nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I was coming home to surprise my sister for her birthday when the police arrested me. The charges against you are being dropped immediately, the warden continued. There was no stolen vehicle, no crime committed, and no legal reason for your arrest. You will be released within the hour, and the county will provide transportation back to your hotel. Thank you, Marcus said simply. The warden leaned forward, her face serious. Mr. Thompson, I want you to know that what happened to you here was completely unacceptable. Captain Morrison and his guards violated your civil rights, used excessive force, and endangered your safety. I am terminating Morrison's employment immediately, and the other guards involved will face disciplinary action. Marcus looked at her steadily. What about the other prisoners, Warden? What about the men who don't have military records to protect them? Morrison has been abusing people for years and nobody ever stopped him. Warden Walsh was quiet for a long moment. You're right, she said finally. I should have dealt with Morrison a long time ago. I was aware of complaints about his behavior, but I didn't take them seriously enough. That was my failure, and I take full responsibility for it. Within 3 hours, news of the incident had spread far beyond the prison walls. A local reporter had heard about the fight from someone who worked at the jail, and by evening the story was on every news channel in the state. Decorated war hero brutally attacked in county jail, read the headlines. The story went viral on social media. People were outraged that a man who had risked his life defending his country had been treated like a criminal and assaulted by the very people who were supposed to protect him. Politicians began calling for investigations, civil rights groups demanded justice, and veterans organizations rallied to Marcus's support. Sheriff Roberts held a press conference the next day to announce his resignation. I take full responsibility for the wrongful arrest of Sergeant Thompson, he said to a room full of reporters. There is no excuse for what happened, and I am stepping down immediately. Captain Morrison was arrested and charged with assault, civil rights violations, and abuse of power. The other guards involved received suspensions and criminal charges. The county agreed to pay Marcus a substantial settlement, though he donated most of the money to organizations that helped wrongfully convicted prisoners. 2 months later, Marcus stood outside the courthouse after Morrison's sentencing hearing. The former captain had been sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. Ironically, he would now be wearing an orange uniform himself. Sarah Thompson stood next to her brother, holding his arm tightly. She had been terrified when she learned what had happened to him, but also incredibly proud of how he had handled the situation. So what happens now? She asked. Marcus looked up at the sky, feeling truly free for the first time in months. Now I go back to doing what I do best, he said. Serving my country and protecting people who can't protect themselves. He had learned something important during his time in jail. The enemy wasn't always a foreign soldier in a distant country. Sometimes the enemy wore a uniform and a badge, and sometimes the real battle was fought right here at home. But justice had been served, and that was what mattered most. The quiet soldier had found his voice, and the world was listening.